Welcome to Miniature Realms, my name's Stuart, and with Warriors of Chaos just announced for Warhammer the Old World, I thought it was the perfect time to bring you this video. Unfortunately, this wonderful miniature isn't my own, it's part of a commission, but I decided to film it because I thought it would be really fun to share with you guys on the channel. I am working on a Warriors of Chaos army and that will make its way to the channel soon. Maybe it's already there by the time you're watching this video. But the miniature is assembled and primed and separate from the base, ready for painting, and it's time to crack on. As I so often do, I'm underpainting my miniatures by using a zenithal-ish prime with the airbrush. This is just white over the top of the black, and then in some cases I give it a subtle dry brush as well, really to pick out that edge detail. It really helps with details like the hair and the skin, which I'll apply using glazed layers as a base coat before highlighting afterwards. Also follow the same method on the base as well. It's fantastic for going over these little rock and skull areas. The cannon itself gets a different treatment, and I'm starting with decayed metal, and it gets an all over spray, but it's a light spray, so I'm not trying to completely cover every area of black. I want to leave some of that black in the shadows and let the metallic do its job of giving it a nice thin covering, but also allow some of that shading to show through. It gives some greater depth rather than just attacking this with a metal rattle can would do. The next layer is black metal from the same scale, colour, metal and alchemy range, and again I'm just adding this as a sort of subtle thin layer rather than one big thick coat. I'm allowing some of that decayed metal to show through. I want this to be really grimy and chaosy and dirty, and just giving light areas a go with an airbrush here and making sure that brown is showing through. It really gives it that kind of dirty, warm look. Now of course, if you don't have an airbrush, much of this tutorial will be able to follow, and using a rattle can isn't a bad thing to do. I just like to do it this way with the airbrush because I have the tool and use it. This is Platinum Crown from the Two Thin Coats range, and it's got a slightly brown element to it. I'm using this for the final highlight, really just trying to catch the tops of the wheels where the light would shine on the tops of the cannon. I didn't want to go for a bright silver like a Game Air silver. If you watch a lot of my channels, that will often be my go-to now. This is just slightly dirtier and give it a slightly more desaturated tone. I quite liked it with the brown tones that are showing through. For the skin, we have a mix of dwarf skin, deep purple and gloomy violet from the Vallejo Express colour range. The dwarf skin forms the basis of this, a smooth thin coat over all the flesh areas, allowing it to run into those recesses, and because we have that underpainted zenithal prime, you get a really quite nice effect as it is. Then after that we go in with the deep purple and the gloomy violet, so the darker purpler tone we add into all the recesses around where the shadows would form the most, and then the redder tone we add around the knees, around the knuckles, not that you can see them on these miniatures, around the elbows and things as well. It just gives you as a multi-toned flesh layer without doing any highlighting at this stage. Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Baron of Dice, premium wargaming dice. Over 500 styles, over 4,000 customer reviews. Welcome to the best dice on the planet. Baron of Dice have a huge range of dice to suit all of your factions and armies. Check out some of these awesome chaos related dice designs. They have square and rounded corners as well. You can find a link in the video description, and if you use the code Miniature Realms you get 5% discount. And back to the painting, we have contrast Cygor brown, whole red and German camo pale brown from Model Colour, and this is a nice little easy triad that you can use for a reddish brown leather. Start by covering all of the leather areas in the Cygor brown. So in this case we have boots, we have gloves, we have leather strapping for the helmet, leather armour. Then we come in with the whole red for a relatively heavy highlight. What you're trying to do is make sure you leave the Cygor brown in the shadows in all the recesses for sure, but you're going at least 50% coverage with this whole red, which looks very bright and red when you first apply it, but it does dull down quite a lot when it's dry. And that final highlight of the German camo pale brown, just some thin lines here or there where the light catches the most. Now contrast skeleton horde, then Iraqi sand and white grey for model colour for a little kind of off-white, bone white triad as well. So we're starting with that skeleton horde contrast paint, going over the little pouches on the back, some of the little bags and things as well. Onto the skulls, there's plenty of those all over the base. Before following in with the Iraqi sand and the white grey for subtle highlights. It's really simple to do, and because of that zenithal stage to start with, you've got a nice outline to follow. Now we're returning to Vallejo Express colour. This is Black Lotus, which is one of their blacks. This is a very blue based black, so if you paint it on large flat areas it looks very blue, because we have such tight packed in detail on the beards of these Chaos Dwarves. This is a fantastic colour to use because it goes into all those details, looks very dark in the recesses, but just gives you this really easy highlight on top of all the little braids there on the beard. And I'm going to leave them at that. I'm not going to come back and highlight those at all. With all the other layers highlighted and painted nicely, this just looks great. Back to metallics, we have decayed metal and black metal again from scale colour, and this time with Game Air Silver as the highlight, and that's different from the Hellcannon when we used the two thin coats paint. So here we're using the Game Air Silver just to make the metallics stand out a little bit. So we're starting with a base coat of that decayed metal over all the metallic areas on all three members of the crew. And once that is down, we can go back in with the black metal, which is the main body of the metallic colour we're using, making sure that I'm leaving some of that decayed metal showing in the recesses quite heavily in places. I want this metal to look old and dented and rusty and not very well looked after. There's quite a lot of metal areas on these miniatures, so it's worth taking your time working your way around all each of the crew members in turn so you don't miss anything. Then ending off with a little bit of the Game Air Silver, just some little scratches here, some little top highlights to make it pop. Sticking with metallics and the same scale colour range, we have Necro Gold and Elven Gold. These are perfect just to add a little bit of difference to the metallic areas on these dwarves. So I'm picking out some of the little accoutrements to their beards and the fronts of their helmets here, and it really makes a difference. Starting with that Necro Gold as a base layer, it can go over that decayed metal really nicely, so you've already got like a first highlight here, before finishing off with the Elven Gold for a little extra highlight. Now it's time for an oil wash, and we're using Soilworks Dark Mud, which is a dark brown colour, and I'm using this in place of an Agrax Earthshade or something like that at this stage. If you don't use oil washes, you could use those kind of more standardised washes. I'm a big fan of oil washes. I talk about them a lot in my painting tutorials, so I try not to bang on about them too much here, but I'm using them here with an old brush. You don't want to use one of your new brushes because you will mess them up. I'm applying it just to the metallic areas, and the great thing about oil washes is that you can tidy them up and clean them off afterwards, so if they do pull, it doesn't matter. And when they dry, they look nice and matte in all the recesses, which makes them look really kind of old and weathered, which is perfect for this paint job. Again, it's a matter of working your way around all the miniatures. Allowing this oil wash really to run into those recesses is excellent at doing that. It doesn't pull anywhere near as much as a standard wash would anyway. And it's perfect for the chains and around the edges of the skulls and things on the base as well. In fact, it's perfect over everything. I'm putting it over the rocks and allowing it to run into all the sand texture that's already on the base. This stuff is just great as a replacement for your regular washes. And guess what? Yep, it's going all over the Hellcannon as well. I'm trying to keep it off the areas where the skulls are. We're going to come back and paint afterwards. It won't matter if it dried fully, but it will make it easier to apply the later stages where I can. But again, just washing it all over fairly liberally, allowing it to run into those recesses. We're going to come back and tidy it up afterwards. And this is the magic stage where you get a little bit of Artist White Spirit. And you do want to use Artist White Spirit, not the stuff you find in your local hardware store. Old brush again, just dry it off on a bit of paper towel, and you just remove it from any of the flat surfaces once it's dry. Now, if you blast it with a hairdryer, you can get to this stage relatively quickly. If you leave it a couple of hours, it will be at this stage where it's surface dry to the touch, and you just make it really shiny again, but leaving it in all those recesses. It just comes straight back off the top, and you just couldn't do this with a standard wash. Once it's on there, it's on there. Again, working my way along all the miniatures. At this stage, if you're using a standard wash, you may be going back in with that mid-tone colour again, or the highlight again, just to relayer up, to tidy it up. But in this case, you just don't have to. And back to the Hellcannon itself, the same thing. Anywhere it's pulled a little bit, like along the top here of that flattish panel, I can just go along with that white spirit and to remove it back off by dabbing it on. It just really cleans and tidies it up. So once that's all dry, I'm going back with that same golden mix of Necro Gold and Elven Gold from Scale Colour and just picking out some of the details on the cannon. I didn't want them to be quite as dark, so we have the skull motif and we have the chaos symbols around the top as well. And after the layer of Necro Gold, I'm going back in with the Elven Gold, not completely covering the Necro Gold, of course, the same method as before. So we're layering up, leaving a little bit of the darker shade showing each time. And then once dry, we're back in with another oil wash, and this is grease from the same Soilworks range, and it's slightly more sepia, so it won't dirty down that gold quite as much. While we're waiting for that to dry, we can go back to the skin, and we have Barbarian Brawn, Dwarven Skin and Elven Skin from the Two Thin Coats range, this little triad. I'm not really using the Barbarian Brawn, it's only there if I feel I need to reinforce a shadow, so we're going in with the mid-tone and the highlight tone, just touching up the skin a little bit, adding a little highlight here and there where my glazes earlier with the purples and reds have maybe dulled it a little bit too much. So it's very, very simple, very, very subtle little lines here and there just to make the skin pop. Now this is model colour white grey, lovely, lovely paint, really good coverage and smooths down and thins really, really nicely without getting too chalky. I'm actually base coating again here. I'm going back in all of the areas that aren't going to be metallic now and just picking them out. So we have these skulls on the inside of the cannon, but we also have these kind of fleshy looking parts on it as well, which you can see I've already fleshed back out again or blanked back out again, ready for later layers. There's a few little areas dotted all over the Hellcannon here, so there's a little sort of screaming skull that's kind of half organic melded in with all of the mechanical areas. And at the same time I'm just blanking out here the sort of horns that are on the top of the Hellcannon. Back to the dwarf skin here from a Vallejo Express colour and just covering all of those sort of fleshy, organic, gross bits that are on the back of the Hellcannon. These are slightly larger areas than you have on the skin for the dwarf, so I'm trying to be careful here to move it around with my brush to prevent it from pooling or having tide marks. I do want it to get into all those greases and things as well though to add that detail in, so I'm just taking my time to make sure it's a nice smooth coat. It's also perfect for all those little organic mixed in with mechanical areas around the wheels and tucked in about the gun. Now we're reaching for contrast. Skeleton Horde again. There are a few skulls dotted around, dangling there from the top. There are a lot of sort of magical skull screaming faces as well, so I'm trying to make sure that I pick the right ones out and paint them the right colour. The ones at the back here, which seem to be linked to the organic parts, do look like standard skulls rather than magical, but I'm going to try and do a bit of a mix of the both on these, I think. And the same Skeleton Horde is perfect for the bone colour that's on these horns. Sticking with the horns, I'm using some contrast Garagax sewer here, and I'm working from the tip in and then wetting my brush and just wet blending and feathering out into the Skeleton Horde area so it kind of blends smoothly without a definitive thin line between them. Now, staying with contrast, we have some Black Legion. It's the same method as before, but this time just adding a little bit of black right to the tip. This is contrast Talassar Blue, which as you can see in the pot is pretty vibrant. So my client wanted the sort of ethereal magic in the gun to be blue. I'm guessing he has a Tzeentch army. So rather than sort of a flaming fiery skulls that you very often see, especially in the studio paint job, I believe, if I'm stretching my memory back there, we're using this blue effect. And that's why I wanted the white down in the first place. And this Talassar Blue is really, really lovely. It goes over really, really nicely and runs into all those recesses, but already gives you this nice sort of highlight that's showing up over the flatter areas, the raised areas of those skulls. Also adding this same colour actually into the barrel itself and into this sort of magical power area with all these screaming faces at the back where the ammunition would be, I suppose, in a normal gun. This is very reminiscent of a sort of World War II looking gun. And then adding a little bit thinned down here over some of these skulls on the side, but I'm doing a bit of a mix of Skeleton Horde and this blue just to show there's a little bit of a ethereal power built into the magic here. I hope it'll look right at the end. Now with all of that fully dry, and that is important, this is Vallejo Model Air, and it's just great for the airbrush. And I'm just using the airbrush to add a little bit of a glow effect to all of these sort of blue magical areas. Now, I'm being very careful here. I don't want the overspray to cover the areas I've already finished. And if you haven't got an airbrush or don't use an airbrush, you could dry brush this stage. Just adding a little bit in there, nice light dusting just to brighten it in the center, but not take away all the blue that we already had on there. Same at the back as well, with all those screaming faces there. Now with that white layer dry, I want to just blend it all back again. So I'm using a bit of a 50-50 mix here of the Talisar blue and some contrast medium on my wet palette, mixing them together into a nice little glaze. And then after that, just gently glazing back over those areas that I've lightened with the airbrush. You still have that lighter center, but it's not quite so stark, and you don't remove all that detail or hide all that detail with a quick blast of the airbrush. You see the lighter glaze still runs into the recesses there, ties it all in a little bit, but keeps the effect. Now another 50-50 mix with the contrast medium, but this time technical paint blood for the blood god. And I mixed it on the wet palette again. I'm just applying a thin glaze over all of the gruesome fleshy areas. I want it to look pretty icky and gross. I always go to the place like the Thing, the film like that, rather than sort of little spots here or there. And chaos is pretty gruesome in the Warhammer universes, and I think this is a really fun way to portray it. And that's them all done, based to match my client's scheme, or fairly similar. So snow bases over a relatively sort of barren and rocky land, and they look pretty cool. I had loads of fun doing them. Definitely want to pick them up for my own army now.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed the video so far, but just before I show you the final pictures of the painted Hellcannon, if you have enjoyed the video, please do give us a like, put a comment below, maybe you've subscribed to the channel if you haven't done so already. It helps the channel grow, be seen by other people. If you'd like to support even further, check out the links in the video description for the channel sponsors and affiliates, and also my Patreon if you'd like to support in that way too.
And now back to those final pictures, and apologies if you can hear rain and thunder in the background. It seems like every time I sit down to record audio for one of my videos at the moment, we seem to have biblical storms raining down on my office, and I'm on the top floor with a slightly slanted roof on one side, so it really hammers down. So if you are hearing any of that through the microphone, then that's what it is. I've not added some strange doom-laden effects to this chaos related video. I really did have loads and loads of fun doing these, and I definitely want to pick one of these up for my own army now. It's very much a tabletop finish here. That's what the client has asked for and has paid for, but I think it shows that you can still have a striking finish without really going into any super high-end techniques here. Lots of airbrush use, I know, and I know not everyone uses airbrushes, but the oil washes and things like that can really make your army look very cool without needing to learn too much to do it. So I do encourage people to go ahead and try them. I mentioned at the top of the video that I was working on my own Warriors of Chaos, and it's something I started a few months back and put on pause. It was actually a speed paint project, and I started filming quite a while ago. And I put it on pause because the dwarves were announced, and I started working on my dwarves, and knew that I was going to crack this army and this project back out again as soon as the Warriors of Chaos were announced by the Old World team. I'm going to be finishing those off now, and it will be a nice feature video when I show you a whole 2,000 point army that I've painted relatively quickly and simply. It's using all of the current Age of Sigmar models. I say current, they were at the time. Some of them have now come off sale and other things have come on, but I'll explain all of that in a video. But for those of you who want to start collecting Warriors of the Chaos now without waiting for the re-releases from the Warhammer, the Old World range, you can definitely do that with the Age of Sigmar range, and this video should help you do that. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Any of you excited about Warriors of Chaos returning to their square-based home? Maybe you've already been playing Warriors of Chaos anyway, like many people have been using that Age of Sigmar range. But I'd love to hear about that in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.